Okay, we're recording. Welcome to Searching the Health Sciences Literature for Beginners. We'll just go down this nice little list and introduce ourselves. I'm Rachel Chandler. You can remember that because it's like the TV show Friends, although I'm not named after that. I am the Science and Data Visualization Librarian here at GSU, which means that I'm the subject librarian and liaison to a lot of the science departments like biology, chemistry, biomedical sciences, and I'm also an affiliate with the Research Data Services Department in assisting with data visualization.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joel Glagowski. I'm the librarian for the College of Nursing and Health Professions, and I'm also an affiliate member of the Data Services team.
And hi, y'all. I am Bethany Havis. I'm the librarian with a subject specialty in public health and gerontology. So if anyone is in those areas, you've probably seen me before. Hello again.
Okay, well, I'll start us out in the presentation. So just because this is a presentation for beginners, I'm going to start at the very, very beginning and remind everyone what a scholarly source is. Scholarly sources are written by academics. They're written by scholars for other scholars. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but you can see a nice picture on the left-hand side, right-hand side of the screen that has a bunch of different types of academic journals. So that's generally the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about searching today, but specifically within the medical and health sciences literature. Next slide, Joel. So another important thing to know, besides knowing that something is scholarly, it's important to understand the peer review process. A paper submitted to a peer review journal has gone through this process. Peer reviews are other experts in the field. They're selected as like a volunteer or service based on their background and expertise. And peer review helps ensure the quality of research because you have someone else reading over it and backing it up and verifying that it is reliable. Next slide. So just a quick note, because we sometimes get this question in particular with people who are coming from outside of the sciences. We'll be talking a lot about this type of research. We're talking about empirical research. So empirical research, empirical studies, empirical papers are conducted with the scientific method, like the method of research where you have a question, you establish a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, make observations, and then you analyze the results and you present the findings. And this is important because as opposed to other types of primary sources or primary research, empirical research is we know it's reliable. We know that experiments can be replicated because they have a very detailed methodology section. Findings and data can be confirmed and conclusions can be built on. And so in health sciences and medicine generally, and in this session, what we'll be talking about is empirical primary sources. Next slide. So another thing that's really important to note, we're talking about scholarly sources, peer-reviewed sources, and empirical sources. Scholarly and peer-reviewed sources, they're not always going to be both. There's a lot of scholarly sources that are not peer-reviewed. That doesn't mean they're any less important. It's just, something to note. But empirical research experiments, empirical primary sources are going to be peer-reviewed scholarly sources. And this is really important because with the scientific method, the research is conducted with the scientific method, and then peer-reviewed when it gets published in a scholarly journal, then we know, we're getting as close as possible as to being objective, and we can know that it's very verifiable and very reliable. Next slide. Okay, so another thing that was important for us to review before we get into the nitty-gritty is different types of sources. If anyone, again, is not coming necessarily from a, biology, science, whatever background, this is going to be a little bit different if you're not coming from the sciences, because there are types of primary sources that wouldn't be considered a primary source in science. The definition of a primary source is just original firsthand material or original research. So you can see this firsthand material might be where we get certain things, like in disciplines like history and stuff like that. The firsthand material is primary source, but we're talking about it here. We're talking about original research. Whereas a secondary source is going to be an interpretation, a commentary, an analysis on a primary source. And then a tertiary source, which are also important to know, is going to be a collection or an index of both primary and secondary sources. Next slide. So to make this a little more clear, we have some characteristics of each of the types of sources. So we know primary sources, they report original discoveries or research. They're usually found in peer-reviewed or scholarly journals, and they explain methodologies of experiments, whereas a secondary source will analyze, provide a commentary, provide a review. They're also published a lot in scholarly and peer-reviewed journals. They provide context, perspective, critique. Basically, the last 2 points for each of those are the most important for differentiating. A primary source is factual, whereas a secondary source is interpretive. So, and then a tertiary source is a collection or categorization. So, next slide, Joel. We can see here, yes, reviews published in academic journals are absolutely secondary sources. So this is really important. It doesn't make them any less reliable, but they are a secondary source. If you're looking at a secondary source review, that's a really great place to find primary sources, especially like a systematic review and stuff like that. So if you go to the reference section, but generally, you know, the primary source in science is going to be a scientific experiment or original research. It includes things like proceedings from meetings. It also includes case reports, technical reports, stuff like that. Whereas all your types of reviews and analyses are going to be secondary. And then tertiary just means we're getting into stuff like encyclopedias, dictionaries, handbooks, tables, not like a table figure in a paper, a table like a table that has all the properties of different minerals or substances, something like that, like a reference data table. And then, of course, not included in encyclopedias in this is Wikipedia. Just always have to say it. Next slide. So what is the health sciences literature? That's what we're kind of talking about today. So it is the scientific literature, primary and secondary sources, specifically of medicine and health sciences. So it's the documents that are published by those practicing and researching in the field of medicine. And today we're mostly going to be looking at stuff like what is published. Usually when you say literature, you're talking about it in the scholarly sense. So published in scholarly and academic journals. This is an example from our amazing library database called Browsing, where you can browse through all the different scholarly journals that we have access to at GSU, and divides them into these great overview and broad topics, and also more specific subtopics. You can see here an example of a bunch of different biomedical and health sciences journals. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. Next slide. And yeah, next person can take it over from here.
Joel, I think you're still muted.
So just to follow up on the division of health literature, the three sources here, I guess this is a little bit redundant, but one thing to point out that primary is sort of synonymous with empirical. So I think about primary research and empirical research as the same thing. And another way to categorize them is whether or not they're filtered or unfiltered. So filtered just means somebody, not the original researcher, has reviewed that work in some way. So primary literature is original research published by the original by the folks who conducted the original research. Secondary literature, somebody else is reviewing work done by others. So these are some examples of the types of things in health literature. So one thing that we want to talk about here is evidence-based medicine. So a lot of research in health sciences is evidence-based. Evidence-based medicine is the explicit and judicious use of the best current research evidence. It's integrated with clinical expertise and patient values to inform decisions about the care of individual patients. So there's generally a process that folks who are practicing evidence-based medicine will follow. So here are the steps. Step one is ask an answerable question. So that's sort of, if you've, we'll talk about this a little bit as we go, but you want to break your research question into discrete topics. A lot of folks use the PICO format. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next session. And it's important to acquire the best evidence. So the steps 1 and 2 are the steps that the library can help you with. The other steps: appraise the evidence, apply a decision, and assess your performance. Those are more for like the subject experts, the content experts. But here in the library, we're going to help you primarily with steps 1 and 2. So not all health literature, not all evidence is created equally, right? So there's a hierarchy of evidence. So at the top of the hierarchy are systematic reviews, followed by critically appraised topics and articles. Randomized controlled trials are next. So you can see the sort of like the gold standard of evidence is going to be systematic reviews. And so we talked a little bit about primary or unfiltered or empirical articles. So I just wanted to note here that a primary article does not necessarily mean that it's a higher level of evidence. You can see here from this pyramid that systematic reviews, which are secondary literature, are actually considered to be at the top of the evidence pyramid. In case some of these study types don't make sense, or if you're not familiar with them, this next slide explains a little bit about the commonly used study types in health sciences. Systematic review is a critical assessment and evaluation of all the research studies done on a topic. So this involves creating a very specialized systematic search that captures all of the evidence that was ever created on that topic. So putting together the search for a systematic review is a big part of that process. A meta-analysis, the way I think of a meta-analysis is it's sort of like the next step after a systematic review. Meta-analysis is when you apply statistics to your findings in the systematic review. So it typically follows a systematic review. So you can't really do a meta-analysis without doing the systematic review step first. A randomized controlled trial is a study that randomly assigns participants into either an experimental group or a control group, and at the or during the process or at the end of the process, the intervention or the treatment is evaluated between the two groups. So what impacted that treatment or intervention have on the experimental group? Clinical trial is a study that involves subjects receiving treatments or interventions for certain diseases or conditions to determine the treatment's safety or effectiveness. Animal research studies, any of the above on this list could be done with animal studies. So it's just a study that's conducted using animal subjects. For health sciences folks, at least in the areas that I work with, if we're putting together a systematic review or a scoping review, a lot of times we don't want to look at animal studies. So just be aware of that. It sort of depends on what your topic is and what you're trying to do and what your discipline is. We'll talk about how to filter articles by study type as we go. And cohort studies are observational studies in which a group of individuals are studied over time. So where can we find literature by type? So primary and secondary articles, you can pretty much find those in the same places. So library databases, PubMed, Embase, CINAHL, Cochrane Library is where you would primarily find primary and secondary sources. Tertiary literature, you can also find that in databases like PubMed, but you can also find that in books. So a lot of handbooks and that sort of thing that sort of compile or summarize primary or secondary literature will be found in books that you can find in the library catalog. We have another database called Medline Plus, which is a consumer-focused database that contains some tertiary literature. Nursing Reference Center Plus, which is like an online encyclopedia of health sciences, and maybe some popular sources like WebMD might qualify as tertiary. Okay, so where can you find this kind of information at GSU? Well, we're going to start with the library databases. So this is a screenshot from the library website. when you first go to the library website, you may notice there's this big search box, and I'm going to discourage you from using that big search box on the front of the library website. Instead, I want to direct your attention to the databases by name or the databases by subject. So let's pull up a slide here. So if you're not familiar with the library website, this is what it looks like. So a lot of people, this is what I was talking about a minute ago, a lot of people are tempted to use this search box because it's prominently displayed front and center, but your search results are going to be a little bit better, a little bit more focused if you use a subject-specific database. The subject-specific databases are sort of geared towards health sciences. They're equipped with filters and options that allow you to sift through the medical literature better than this sort of one-size-fits-all interface. So the databases we're going to talk about today, well, primarily we're going to talk about PubMed. So if I were interested in PubMed, I would just click on P and I would find it in the list. Now, in general, you want to start all of your research from the library website. We pay a lot of money to be able to access these databases and journals, and the way to identify, and they're all licensed for the GSU community, right? So the way to identify yourself as a member of the Georgia State University community is to start from the library webpage. And as you may know, PubMed is freely available to everybody. So you don't necessarily need to be part of the GSU community to access PubMed, but we do encourage you to access it through the library because it's going to be easier to track down the full text of the articles if you access through the library. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So if we know the name of the database, we're in good shape. We can just find it in the A to Z list here. If you're not quite sure what the best database is for your subject, you can use the drop-down menu. So for example, if we're interested in nursing databases, we can go to the nursing category. So we see all of the best bet is CINAHL, but we can scroll this whole list. All of these databases are going to be useful for nursing research. Okay.
Are the databases accessible to students of, I guess, like non-nursing students? Can they access nursing databases?
Yeah, they're available to everybody in the Georgia State University community, regardless of discipline or program. Any other questions at this point? Yeah, thanks for the question. Okay, so PubMed is the database we're going to primarily focus on today. So I want to talk a little bit about what PubMed is. It's the free search interface for Medline, which is the core biomedical literature database that's used in the US. It's maintained by the National Library of Medicine. One of the nice things about PubMed, since it's freely accessible, you can use it even if you've left Georgia State University. So if you're going to learn one health sciences database, because it's free, this is the one I strongly encourage you to use. And let's see. I mentioned this earlier, but it's free to everybody, but we still recommend that you use it. I'm sorry, that you access it through the library's list of databases, because we'll see in a minute, it's going to be easier to track down the full text of articles. So we get questions sometimes, what's the difference between PubMed, Medline, and there's also this thing called Medline Plus. So what are we talking about here? So Medline is a bibliographic database that includes content from academic journals covering medicine and health sciences, life sciences, and related fields. It's the largest component of PubMed. So PubMed is actually broader than Medline. So PubMed includes everything that's in Medline plus content from other sources, notably PubMed Central, which is an archive of full text articles, and this NCBI bookshelf, which is citations for books and book chapters. And I just put a little note in here. I want you to make sure that you're not confusing Medline with Medline Plus. Medline Plus is a consumer-focused database. The content in Medline Plus is quite different than that in Medline or PubMed. So Medline Plus, we talked about primary versus secondary and tertiary sources. Medline Plus would be considered probably to contain mostly tertiary material. So it's probably not appropriate for use in a research paper. But if you have some general health questions, maybe you're just curious about a health-related topic, it might be a good place for background information. I just want to note here too that PubMed is just one of several interfaces that are available to search the Medline database. We actually subscribe to Medline with full text through EBSCO. So that's just another option for you, but just keep in mind it won't include the PubMed Central and the NCBI bookshelf content. And it won't be freely accessible once you leave GSU, but it is an option. Okay, so when you're searching a database like PubMed, there are two main approaches you can take when searching. There's the keyword and phrases search. So the keywords are they're not predefined. Like they're just words that if you have a research topic, what you want to do is break down your research topic into key concepts and break down those concepts into searchable terms. So those would be your keywords or your search terms. They're not tied to any thesaurus or predetermined list of subject terms. Subject terms are the sort of the opposite of the keywords and phrases. So subject terms are index terms that are used in databases. So PubMed, for example, uses MESH, which is the medical subject heading system. So these terms are drawn from a controlled vocabulary. So predetermined terms that are assigned to articles in PubMed. They're drawn from a specific list. It can be really helpful if you want to zero in on a topic to find the index term for your topic. If you really wanted to drill down and find everything on that topic. There are a couple ways you can go about. We're going to talk more about mesh terms, by the way, in the later session, but I just wanted to introduce it here. When you go into PubMed, there is a mesh database. So if you're interested in finding the subject term for your topic, you can do that. And mesh terms are also listed at the database record for each article. So if you find an article, you scroll down a little bit, you will see the mesh terms. And I just wanted to, yes.
We have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Not in the chat. I think Cindy has her hand raised.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm just curious between like keywords, phrases, subject terms, like when we are trying to identify, like in terms of doing a research paper, there's always that one main, most important referenced article of whatever topic you're writing about. What is the most effective way of identifying the accurate keywords, subject terms, phrases to find that article? And how do we know that that is like the article of that area that, that is used?
Excellent question. Let's do a little example. So I did a search here for a topic. So my research topic, let's pretend I'm looking at the difference between NSAIDs and acetaminophen for an elderly population with osteoarthritis. So I just, off the top of my head, I came up with these search terms. So these would be keywords because I haven't checked them against the mesh subject headings. So I'm just going to put these in and I'm going to run my search just to see what's out there in the field, right? So maybe I'm just doing a preliminary search to sort of get an idea of how these topics are covered in the literature. And let's say I'm going to take a look at number 2 here. So when I click on number 2, I see the full record for this article. And when I scroll down, I will see a list of all the mesh terms that have been assigned to this article. So if this article is really on target, it's really relevant to what I'm trying to study, I always take a look at the mesh terms and sort of run through them and see which ones could be most helpful to me. Like maybe the age of the population isn't super important to me, but I see acetaminophen, I see anti-inflammatory agents, non-steroidal. I see osteoarthritis. These are all mesh terms here. Another way to assess sort of like the quality of an article is to see who's citing it and how many times it's been cited. So if you look at the record, there's a cited by. If you click on see all cited by, the more articles that have been cited, the chances are they're going to be more important articles. So PubMed has this feature it's actually very helpful. You can see who's cited this particular article. And if you're just looking for other articles on this topic, again, you can construct a new search using the keywords or the mesh terms you found here. Another option is to look at the similar articles. So PubMed will list articles that are similar to the ones that you're looking at. If you're doing like a systematic review or a scoping review where it's super important that you create a replicable search, then you probably don't want to use the similar articles. But if you're just looking for other articles on a topic, these can be really helpful.
Jill, Marlena has a question as well.
Yes.
She has her hand raised.
To follow up on that point, is there a more refined way? Like if you find an article that you think is on point and you want to find other articles that support or have a point that's related to the article that you like, is there a more refined way outside of just scrolling through 300 different articles to find if there's anything similar? So once you find an article, is there another way to find other articles that are connected to that initial article?
I think the best way to do that would be to look at the cited articles. So look at who cited that.
Okay.
If my colleagues have another way to approach that, feel free to chime in. I think Google, this is sort of is a little bit beyond the scope of PubMed, but if you go into Google Scholar, you can search within the site. Google Scholar has a cited reference list too, and you can go in there and search within those results.
You can do the same thing in Web of Science as well.
So
Web of Science is really good for citation and ranking data. That's like their thing in particular, I would say.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with all of that. Also offer that I tend to use Google Scholar because of that search within option that Google Scholar gives you that I haven't seen used in a lot of the other databases that do the cited by search for you. So Google Scholar I just find to be a little bit more user-friendly and having that option in case you run into something where 300, 400, 1,000 other people have cited it and you don't want to go through all of those pages of who else has cited it. You can search within that list to say, okay, well, which one of these are talking about the population I want or the location I'm talking about or the specific intervention. It helps.
Cindy, did you have another question? I think Cindy had another question.
yeah, so that was all very helpful. I think something that I have personally come across kind of difficulty in terms of like identifying like the keywords for search is like, so my thing is peds, like pediatrics, pediatric psych. So sometimes I put in like pediatrics and like pediatric psych or pediatric whatever chronic headache, and it's not giving me what I want, and I find that I have to put in like children or adolescent and specific. Yeah, so like how do we differentiate specifically what will populate the widest casting net and specific keywords to use that's going to be yield the most effective result in terms of literature search?
So yeah, we will talk about that more in the next session, but we can address it a little bit here. So if I was going to create a search, the first thing I do when I go to a search, I'm trying to find terms that will cast the broadest net or the widest net. I'll go into PubMed. And we talked about the mesh terms, and we talked about like maybe finding an article and just seeing what articles have been assigned to that one you've already found. But another way to approach it is to go to the mesh database. So if you're on the main PubMed screen, you can go to the mesh database. and put in your topic here. So let's say I'm interested in NSAIDs. If I find the mesh database, we're just fishing for terms. We're not actually looking for articles yet, but we found this definition for anti-inflammatory agents, non-steroidal. And so this is the closest, this is the term for NSAIDs in PubMed. If you scroll down a little bit, you see a list of entry terms. And if I'm doing like a systematic review type search, I will use these in my search as well as synonyms. And we'll talk in a couple slides from now, we'll talk about how to combine different terms using Boolean operators. But what I would probably do is use, I'm going to click add to search builder. I would use this anti-inflammatory agents, comma, non-steroidal. The mesh in brackets means that I'm searching for that. It's a mesh term, but then I would also search for these as keywords. And just to get back to the presentation for a moment, keywords are non-indexed words. So the words you might find in like a title or abstract of an article. So in this, to do an exhaustive search, you want to use a combination of mesh terms and keywords. So when you're generating a list of keywords, you're trying to come up with all the different ways an author might describe that concept in like a title or an abstract. So those entry terms that we just looked at is a good source for keywords, but also just being familiar with the topic and being maybe doing some preliminary searches, maybe a little background reading, and just being familiar with the concept and how they're covered in the literature. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the next slide is I wanted to talk about Boolean logic. So when you're running a search, in most cases, you're going to be looking for the intersection of more than one topic, right? So if you have two discrete topics that you're searching for, you want to combine those concepts with an AND. So the AND operator narrows your search. If we're looking at these circles, so this one circle on the left includes all of the articles that have to do with elderly people. This search on the right includes all the articles that have to do with osteoarthritis. So the intersection, like this green section here, we're only going to get matches if the article includes both concepts. So that's how the AND works. It's going to reduce the amount of results because both conditions need to be satisfied, right? The other option, and this is sort of getting back to your question from a few minutes ago, how do you broaden your search? How do you cast the widest net? To do that is to generate a list of synonyms or related concepts and combine those with ORs. So if I'm interested in NSAIDs or acetaminophen, I'm going to use the OR operator because it doesn't matter to me if the article just talks about NSAIDs. That's good enough for me. If it just mentions acetaminophen, that's fine too. And the intersection, of course, that would be helpful as well. So the OR is going to broaden your search. It's going to include either terms regardless of whether or not they're both used. So let's do another quick example. So if I hop out into PubMed, so in my example, I didn't put any Boolean operators here, but if I wanted to, what I might do is put an AND in between aged and osteoarthritis, an AND in between these concepts, and because NSAIDs and acetaminophen, I'm interested in either one of these concepts, I'm going to put an OR in between those. And at this point, I'm not super concerned about mesh terms at this point. I'm just putting in keywords. We'll deal more with complex searches with mesh terms in the next session. But this is how you might string those concepts together in a search. And if I click on an article, you'll see on the top right, you'll see the full text links. PMC, we talked about PMC, which is an archive of free articles in PubMed. We'll also see the Find It at GSU button. So the Find It at GSU button, we're only seeing that because we access PubMed through GSU, and it's going to redirect us towards other sources that provide access to that journal article if it's not directly available through PubMed. All right. Okay, so interpreting search results, as we just saw, the default display in PubMed shows you the citation information with a little snippet of the abstract. PubMed will display 10 items per page, but there are ways to customize that if you want to see more articles. And if you click, you can click on the title, see more information about the article. We've done this. We looked at the full text links on the top right, and we scrolled down to see the similar articles in the mesh terms. So again, here are the full text links. If we scroll down, we'll see the similar articles, the cited by articles, and the list of mesh terms. I want to talk a little bit about search filters. They can be used to sort of focus your result set a little bit more. The most commonly used filters, well, actually, I listed this here because I explicitly recommend that you don't use the text availability filter. And the reason for that is, if we go back into the PubMed, we see this Find It at GSU button. Since we're on the GSU campus and we access PubMed through GSU, we will see the Find It at GSU button associated with any article we want. And we're potentially just a click away from the full text of any article when we see that Find It at GSU button. So if we limited to full text in PubMed, we're only going to see articles that have full text directly through PubMed, right? And so everything with that Find It at GSU button, we won't see. Okay, so in this case, I clicked on the Find It at GSU button, but we don't have it. Are all PubMed articles peer-reviewed? All PubMed articles are, well, most of them are from peer-reviewed journals. As we mentioned earlier, there's some book citations and book chapter citations which aren't necessarily peer-reviewed. But the assumption it's safe to assume that everything in PubMed is going to be scholarly and high quality. The things you have to watch out for are there might be like a letter to the editor or something like that, which is published in a scholarly journal. So while the article is, or the journal is scholarly, that doesn't quite qualify as a scholarly article. So there's things that Rachel talked about a few minutes ago, like the components of a scholarly article, that you want to still look out for those, even if you're using something like PubMed. All right.
Joel and Bethany, do we want to skip ahead to the scholarly versus slide 27, just because we're a little bit short on time? We only have about 15 minutes left. Or do you want to do evaluating sources and websites? What do we think?
Whatever you want to do, Bethany.
I am fine with whichever. So if we wanted, just in the interest of time, to go ahead and come back if we end up with a few more minutes. I think I can be pretty tidy with mine.
Yeah, since the interest seems to be more on the scholarly side of things, I think these are helpful, but yeah, we maybe come back at the end.
So you want to jump ahead?
Yeah, maybe slide, what is it? Go through keep going. Okay, one more there, and Bethany can get started.
Okay, well, thanks. So some of the previous slides were addressing popular materials as opposed to scholarly materials. So that kind of speaks to your question with the which articles are peer-reviewed, which things are scholarly, Marlena. Since we all seem to be more focused on the scholarly stuff, we just want to talk a little bit about the parts of a scholarly article. What are you going to see? How do you know it's scholarly? And then also, what are the most important parts to look out for? Because these articles can be lengthy. If you've spent any time in the databases, you may have seen some that are 10 pages long, 20 pages long, just one article, and you're looking at a whole result list of, 50 that you want to skim through. So these are kind of our little tips and tricks too on how to get through these. So the basic parts of a scholarly article, if you have been in a lab class of any kind, you recognize the kind of basic structure of a lab report. And that's really what we're looking at with things like studies, trials, that kind of thing. You see an abstract at the top. So you get that brief summary of the article, including what are they researching, how did they do it, what were the results, very brief, usually only maybe a paragraph or two. And then it goes into the introduction portion. The introduction is going to give you the background information about it. It's going to give you context for why they're doing it. And this is a good lit review area. So if you're looking at an article you really like and you see that they're citing other people, they're talking about other studies that they're building on or getting information from, that's a good section to pay attention to for linking together other folks you may want to look up. After the introduction, they'll go into the methods. So they'll tell you, okay, well, what did we do? How do we do it? How did we choose people if it's a human study? How big were the patient groups? Was it a small patient group? Was it a big patient group? What are the steps that we accomplished in order to get this done? What materials may we have used? They'll tell you how that works so that you know, and it could be replicated. Again, a really key portion of the empirical process, right? It has to be replicable. So after the methods, they'll tell you, hey, these are the results after we told you what we did, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, these different steps. These are the results that we got. These are the findings. And this is usually one of the larger portions of the article that people get stuck in because they have lots of charts, lots of graphs. You see all of those really large spaces in the article where it's just numbers, percentages, decimals, all that stuff. That's in the results and findings. So they're going to tell you exactly what they found, which is great if you're getting into that level of detail, but most of us aren't. So what I think is a little bit more useful to us is the next section under results and findings is discussion. So that's where the authors are going to tell us out of all those numbers that they found, what does it mean? They analyze the data, they tell us, what does that actually mean? If this number went down in this group or this number went up in this group, what does that actually mean here? And that partners with the conclusion at the very end, where they tell us, okay, overall, this is the message we get from completing this study, and this is how it fits into the body of research. So we can move forward from there, and other researchers can follow that discussion along in the literature. And of course, at the very bottom, we see the list of references. Like we all ask y'all to cite your sources. That's because that's what we do. We have to say, where do we get this information from? We have to credit the people who came up with it first, who gave us that information. So list of references at the end. So if you did find anything in the lit review portion, the introduction, and you want to go see, okay, well, who said that or where is that? You go down to the references, you find that, and we can help you find it too if it's not easy to get. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is my very sophisticated color-coded example of the portions that I think are the most important for you to pay attention to, especially as you're starting to gather materials for any topic you're researching. Of course, the further you get into your research project, the more detailed you're going to get with it. You may want to delve deeply into these articles, get some of the actual numbers that they're using. But to start with, when you're just trying to pull stuff that's relevant for you, I really recommend read the top, skim the middle, and read the bottom. It's a really good technique to remember. You don't have to read every page of every article in order to get enough info to see whether or not it might be useful for you and not drive yourself crazy trying to read, 50, 10 or 15 or 20 page articles. So title abstract highlighted in pink there, it's always going to be at the very top. So that's summary right there. Going into the introduction, that first section. This one doesn't happen to have a section header, but usually these articles are going to have headers at each section of that paper. So it's going to be very easy to find where you need to go next. So if you're skimming around, you're skipping a little bit, you can easily see, all right, what section am I looking for next? Where is it? What page is it? And go straight there. So as you can see, the green highlight in this article for materials and methods, they have that header right at the top. So I know exactly where I'm going. I know what I'm reading. Starts with the study design. They give me those nice bullets of exactly what are they doing here? What are the considerations they made? So they will tell you in a well-structured format what sections are what. And after materials and methods, that's where you would have those results listed. So all of those numbers, all the charts. But again, kind of skim that and then go on to discussion conclusion. Next slide, please. So again, we got those nice headings. We love them. That's where we're going to get that meat of the article. Where for someone like me who's not going to go and replicate the article myself, I'm not going to go try to redo this. I don't need to necessarily see all the numbers. I can go and see, okay, if I'm writing about this, tell me, what did they find? What does it mean? And what is that in context of the rest of the literature? So read the top, skim the middle, read the bottom. You can always go back for the specific numbers if you need them. Yeah, Rachel.
I was also going to say, if you're starting out your thesis or your capstone project, checking out the discussion and conclusion can be a great way to identify a good research topic for yourself, because that's part of the whole sections. Like they'll be like, this is where we recommend future research. This is where we could have built on. This is what we would like to know. So that can be really helpful because narrowing down topics is
100%.
hard.
Absolutely. Let them tell you, oh, what other research needs to be done? Because you know what? You could be that person. Oh, awesome. Thank you.
I feel like
Next slide.
it's not
Oh,
said
yeah.
enough that we don't have to read the whole article, so I really appreciate somebody
Mhm.
saying that.
Oh, absolutely. Your librarians, we have vetted this. It works. We encourage you not to read every single bit. It's just very intimidating looking at so much material all at once when you're in a research session. And we absolutely get it. Protect your brain from burnout. And I think it'll go a long way to helping you make more progress as you go. Just a couple other things here to mention. So PubMed, we know PubMed, we love PubMed. We spend a lot of time in PubMed. It's one of my favorites. But just keep in mind as you're looking around that those are not the only ones. We have those nice lists in the A to Z list or the subject databases, those collections of databases for each subject that could be really helpful. We had the great question about looking in other disciplines, and we often work with such interdisciplinary materials. So say if you're in the psychology field, you're going to be looking in psych. You might be going into maybe neurobiology if you're going into some of the actual biology happening. You might be even going into, say, we have a section for social work. If you're looking at maybe how does it affect families in different communities, if you're looking at sociology, there are lots of different areas that could be covered. So you can feel free to look around in any of those. Librarians are also helpful to point you to different databases that you might not know exist yet, because that's what we do. We're just here to help. A couple of the others that we think are really helpful for public health stuff. Well, I say public health, but health sciences stuff. Embase is one. You may have used this already. This is one that is listed in a lot of the health sciences subject areas that contains stuff from Medline, but it has a lot of pharmacological stuff. It has a lot of international stuff. and also CINAHL. So this is a nursing and allied health database. So another good one that kind of goes into the suite of health sciences databases. And we recommend different ones because keep in mind, these are kind of like going to different libraries. You could look at GSU's library for issues related to, say, pediatric headaches, right? We have a certain amount of things that are going to be in that area. But if you look up the same topic in Georgia Tech's library or Valdosta State's library or the Fulton County Public Library, each place you look is going to have a different body of stuff to offer you. You know, some may be the same, but some may be different. And that's why we recommend different databases to see what you're going to get, because no one database is going to have every single thing. So, you know, kind of looking around and also keeping in mind that as you're looking in different databases, they may be a little bit different in the way they handle their subject terms, their syntax. These are owned by different companies. So we saw, you know, PubMed is owned by, you know, organizationally, it is a government body. But here we have Embase, which is owned by a company called Elsevier. CINAHL is owned by the company EBSCO. So they like to do things a little bit differently. And if you have any problems with it, it's a little too weird, or you can't figure out why is this different, again, talk to your librarians because we help you with that. Next slide, please. I think this is the last one here. Something that, I mean, gosh, if y'all have a screen grab or something, just go ahead and screenshot this. We love this flow chart. Just about locating articles. So any article you're trying to find, if it doesn't provide full text, remember, click on that Find It at GSU button. We know it, we love it. It helps you find it in a different database that we subscribe to if it's not in the one you're in. And if we don't have any through another source, we have options for you. You can even submit an interlibrary loan request. That's something where you will tell us, hey, what are you looking for? Tell us the article, book chapter, whatnot. And we have an underground cabal of librarians who go through our secret librarian network, and they will find a library that has that and get it sent over here for you. So, you know, don't panic. You're not at a dead end. If you can't find the full text, just talk to us. We can help you out with that. Yeah, and Joel's absolutely right. I just saw that pop up in the chat that interlibrary loan articles are usually real quick. So think like a day or two because everything's electronic now. So it usually gets sent pretty fast. You get an email with a link and a password to your email address. And if you're looking for a book, you can also do that. But keep in mind that physical books actually have to come through the mail, so that'll be a little bit longer. Not that anyone actually does books much anyway. It's usually almost exclusively articles, right?
And so the level of subscription where you can go to a journal's website and just access anything from the journal's website is actually the most expensive level of subscription. So a lot of times in certain articles from certain journals, we only have it in a library database. So if you're going straight to the journal's website, it might tell you from there that we don't have access to it. But if you search it, you know, in the big library search, the title of the article, it might pop up there. So that's why it's important to use the flowchart.
Mhm. And I know that we're running up on time here. So just if there are any, you know, questions, we want to respect everybody's time and not, you know, keep folks unduly. But are there any other questions? Everyone was really good to, you know, shout out questions and raise hands as we were going, but we want to make sure that we're addressing anything that's left at the end of our session here, the end of our hour.
Thank you so much. This has been really helpful.
Thanks, Cindy.
Awesome. I'm so glad. So yeah, bottom line, we will be sending out the recording and the slides to our attendees. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can email us. I mentioned in the chat that we also make one-on-one consultation appointments. So if you want some detailed help with how to refine your search strategy, if you want some one-on-one help with how do I use this database or what other databases could I use? Could you show me some more? We're very happy to do that as well.
Yes, we are. If anyone has any of those neuroscience, biology type questions, come to me. It's not technically
Everybody.
neuroscience, that would be Charlene, but whatever.
All right,
Okay,
yes,
I'm going
we can
to
end
end the
recording.
recording.
Yeah.
Yeah.